So for now, this coming out of Trump administration, I have to say it's a major blow to the relationship, to the ties, and I believe it's going to go down in the history if it's not corrected immediately as one of the biggest mistakes committed by the Trump administration. Now, President Trump should know better than anyone else. Do you know who gave those authorities way back when in early 1990s to Graham Fuller? It was Bill Clinton. He is a Clinton's master child who has been involved in Operation Gladio B. The reason Turkish government did not make these documents available before was due to US government officials begging Turkey not to make this information available. Because after investigating and obtaining all this evidence against this charlatan who has been posing as a pastor, Turkey had access to some high-level US CIA operatives and assets who are lurking around not only in Turkey, but in Syria and elsewhere in the region. And it was doing the State Department a favor, Turkey, by not making this evidence available. That's also another reason that CIA wanted to see this pastor either dead before it's too late. President Trump repaired this. Because the real sabotage, the real damage is being inflicted from within, not from outside. You clean your own house. You clean your own CIA. You clean up that Justice Department, the FBI, the misnamed Justice Department that is wasting hundreds of millions of dollars of US tax dollars, undermining the democratic process in this country. This is not available to English readers as of yet, because it's brand new. After these sanctions, Turkish government released part of these documentations, the evidence on Pastor Brunson. Several Turkish newspapers have been running these documents, this evidence, and I haven't found English translations, so I have some general translations here that is really, really damning for this guy posing as a pastor, because I'm going to get to that momentarily.
Welcome everyone, I'm Spiro, joined with Newsbud's founder and editor Sibel Edmonds. Now, Sibel Edmonds has some big breaking news for us, but first, we published a breaking story back in February of this year covering the Pastor Brunson case, who is currently being held by Turkish authorities for his alleged involvement with the Gulen movement and the role that they played in the failed coup attempt in Turkey of 2016. Now, in that breaking report, we had a senior State Department official tell Newsbud that despite the Trump administration's efforts to negotiate the release of Pastor Brunson, that rogue elements within the CIA were actually sabotaging the negotiations because Brunson was more valuable as leverage if he remained imprisoned, or even if he were to die while in Turkish custody, so that the U.S. could claim human rights abuses against the Turkish government. Now, we will leave a link in the description for that report, but today we have seen some breaking news as the U.S. has just issued sanctions against two high-level members of the Turkish government, the Minister of Justice and the Interior Minister. Now, this is an unprecedented move by the Trump administration, which claims that the two Turkish officials are directly responsible for Brunson's arrest and detention. Now, the U.S. claims that they have not seen any evidence that Brunson has done anything wrong, and they are calling his detention unjust and unfair. But here, with breaking news on this case, is Sibel Edmonds.
Yes, as you mentioned, Spiro, this breaking news today with the sanctions by the United States placed on two high-level Turkish government officials, completely unprecedented. We have never seen such escalation between U.S. and Turkey in their relationship, even around that attempted coup it did not come to this level. First of all, this is a major failure on any kind of tactic and diplomacy by the United States. We all know the importance of Turkey as a NATO member, as US ally. We know about Turkey's geographic location, Turkey's geostrategic importance. You're looking at one of the biggest military in the world. And that's when we talk about Turkey, we are talking about one of the biggest militaries, largest in the world. And during this very, very highly sensitive time period, when we are seeing all the tension between US and China, US and Russia, the timing of this could not have been worse for the United States. It is a very, very wrong move by the United States that is going to have severe consequences. Right now, as we are recording this, is evening hours in Turkey, okay? People are sleeping there. And I'm telling people, I'm telling you, I'm telling everyone that by the time the Turkish morning hours come, we are going to see some really strong but deserved response from Turkey. And it's not going to be any kind of a mild response, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough response, and it's not gonna be good. I believe personally, President Trump was set up by really bad advisors, okay, by people who have really dubious agenda, and that's exactly what we warned our viewers 6 months ago. We broke the news at Newsbud. We said, while President Trump and Vice President Pence, they are working, and they were working together with the Turkish government officials, including with President Erdogan, try to negotiate and find the best way to get this pastor released or for his case to move forward. There were elements within the CIA, and we know who leads these elements. It is still, even though he's supposedly retired, it is still led by the infamous Graham Fuller. The person who put Graham Fuller on the map was me in 2006. In 2005, 2006, I exposed Graham Fuller. Nobody had heard of this guy's name. Well, Graham Fuller was one of the main operatives for Operation Gladio B. Graham Fuller was one of the main CIA operatives involved in the CIA's 9/11. Graham Fuller also was directly involved with the Boston Marathon bombing case, okay? And that was when people started hearing the name Graham Fuller, CIA's Graham Fuller. Well, these people have been sabotaging. These people have been sabotaging the White House, Trump's White House, President Trump, and Pence. And with what they just did, and this is the sanctions being placed, the response, the tough talks, the threats, that all this shows me that unfortunately, President Trump and his close allies in the White House, they fell for this sabotage. So it's very important for people to watch this video. Now, all this started with all the planning that went underway for this attempted coup in Turkey. And this happened in 2016, July. Well, since 1998, the United States government, and this was initiated by President Clinton at the time, and his CIA Operation Gladio B units, okay? One of its members happens to be Graham Fuller. They brought this radical terrorist Islamist, Fethullah Gulen, Mullah Fethullah Gulen, into the United States while he was wanted in Turkey. They harbored this terrorist. They gave him billions of dollars. With the network they established under this mullah, this radical terrorist Fethullah Gulen, they started implementing Operation Gladio B terror networks in Central Asia, in Caucasus, even in certain regions of Indonesia and Africa, okay? Now, we know all this. Now, through Fethullah Gulen, they concocted this attempted coup and targeted Turkey. The United States government, under President Obama's administration, actively targeted a NATO member for a coup plan. I mean, it really can't get any worse than this. At the time, I was speculating that Turkey was going to get out of NATO, shut down the US bases inside Turkey in response. But despite all the evidence, all the facts coming out, the culprits behind this attempted coup, Turkey still has been bending backwards, being, in my opinion, way too tolerant of what they just went through with their ally nation. I mean, with friends like this, who needs enemy? But it didn't stop there. Turkey started requesting the extradition of Fethullah Gulen from the US government. And they kept providing all this evidence, tons of it. You're looking at files going stacks this high because they date back all the way to 1980s to 1990s. And for the past 2 years plus, the United States government, this is the Justice Department, the State Department, the CIA, basically they have been mocking Turkey, and they've been saying, well, we are looking at it, but we're not going to do anything, basically. Well, again, interestingly, Turkish government, Turkish people were actually supporters of President Trump's candidacy during the primaries, because what was inflicted, to their nation was concocted first in 1990s by the Clinton and Clinton cabal, and then it was continued by the Obama administration. And at the time, President Trump, back then he was a candidate, he actually criticized Obama for destroying the relationship with this extremely important ally, strategically important ally, NATO member, by going along with this attempted coup. President Trump, at the time, the candidate Trump, has gone on record criticizing this. So when he was elected, Turks were celebrating. They were saying, good, because this is what we were getting under the Obama administration. So for now, this coming out of Trump administration, I have to say it's a major blow to the relationship, to the ties, and I believe it's going to go down in the history, if it's not corrected immediately, as one of the biggest mistakes committed by the Trump administration. And I don't believe it's too late, but this is going to be really bad. It's not going to be only bad for Turkey and for the United States. This is going to have a domino effect in the region. Now, after this coup attempt, Turkish government, they had lots of intelligence tips on this pastor, Pastor Brunson, who has been living in Turkey with his wife. And they have basically intercepted a lot of his phone communications with the individual connected to the CIA, primarily with Graham Fuller and Graham Fuller's little baby operatives in Turkey, who actually concocted and went about implementing the attempted coup. And they arrested this guy, they detained him, and this is the Turkish government. And up until today, with this news of the sanctions coming out of the White House, Turkey was not making public a lot of these documents, a lot of these phone intercepts, all the evidence they had against this pastor. And if you go back and watch our video from 6 months ago, even we were giving this pastor a benefit of doubt, saying, granted, we haven't seen any documentation evidence on this pastor. But at the time, when we broke this news, we warned the Trump administration. We even warned the Turkish government. We said certain Clintonite elements within the CIA are discussing various plans targeting the case of this guy, this Pastor Brunson. One of the major points they discussed had to do with getting him killed in Turkish prison and blaming it on Turkish government and causing further escalations, okay? Maybe even a direct attack, a direct coup, not the warm-up they went through, okay? And we also talked about how these elements from the CIA and the State Department have been sabotaging the dialogue between President Trump's administration and the Turkish government officials by using Pastor Brunson's wife. Again, at the time, I believed the wife, Noreen Brunson, was being naive to fall for these sabotage because the CIA elements, while things were kind of working towards the release of the pastor, they were propping her up before a bunch of EU human rights courts, international courts, and they were kind of pumping her so that she would attack the Turkish government and say her husband's health was suffering and that basically it was almost like torture, all of which were complete lies. There were no mistreatment cases whatsoever involving Pastor Brunson in jail in Turkey. Not only that, based on our report, once the Turkish government saw our report, and this has been confirmed, they put extra security on him. Because we as Newsbud, we were the ones who warned everyone. We said CIA wants to kill this guy while he's in jail and basically blamed the Turkish authorities for that. So they were really nervous. They didn't want this guy to die in jail on their watch, in their territory. So they were protecting the pastor by putting extra layers of security. Yet this, his family, the wife, kept going into this international court, attacking Turkey. This was during the time when Pence and Trump, they were making progress, reaching this compromise deal on Pastor Brunson. Well, based on all the new information released, everything I have been gathering from my sources in Turkey, outside Turkey, I no longer give Pastor Brunson this benefit of doubt. And not only that, I 100% am convinced, I am 100% convinced that his wife is also involved with this CIA operations. We tried to reach out to Noreen Brunson 6 months ago. We had people from State Department who were willing to provide this woman with documented information on the sabotage concocted by the CIA targeting her husband in jail, okay? And we did not receive any response other than for her to escalate what mounted to sabotaging the negotiation between the Trump's White House and the Turkish government officials. Now, this is not available to English readers as of yet, because it's brand new. After these sanctions, Turkish government released part of these documentations, the evidence on Pastor Brunson. Several Turkish newspapers have been running it, these documents, this evidence, and I haven't found English translations, so I have some general translations here that is really, really damning for this guy posing as a pastor, because I'm going to get to that momentarily. First of all, they have intercepted his communication over the years with high-level CIA, Pentagon, and U.S. Air Force and intelligence officials, okay? You're looking at a pastor living in a small city in Turkey with his wife. Why a pastor? Ask yourself. Why a pastor would be in touch, constantly getting together, both physically, okay, for years. These are starting from 2011, with CIA officials, with Pentagon intelligence officials, with high-level U.S. Air Force officials. Ask yourself that question. Also, there are all the documents that his wife, Noreen Brunson, also have been directly involved in these secret meetings and in these communications, whether by phone. I'm not sure if some of them are emails with these individuals. They have evidence, documentation linking this guy who's posing as a pastor, Brunson, to Graham Fuller. He was one of the masterminds in this attempted Turkish coup. Now, President Trump should know better than anyone else. Do you know who gave those authorities way back when in early 1990s to Graham Fuller? It was Bill Clinton. He is a Clinton's master child who has been involved in Operation Gladio B. Okay? And there are evidence documents that are directly linking communication and all sorts of signals between Graham Fuller and this guy who's posing as a pastor. And another very close associate of Pastor Brunson happens to be this mullah, this radical imam. His name is Bekir Baz, and he's been in touch, communication, in relationship with this so-called pastors between 2011, 2015, a most wanted guy who is a high level within Gulen's network. This is Mullah Gulen's terrorist network. They have found evidence communication between the so-called pastor and Fethullah Gulen's terrorist network's Indonesia branch, with this guy who heads that terrorist branch in Indonesia. His name is Murad Safa. Again, ask yourself, why would a pastor, some obscure pastor, okay, in Turkey be in touch with the terrorist in Indonesia who is running a terror cell for Fethullah Gulen? I mean, just ask yourself, okay? Now, there is a major name here leaked, and that has to do with these guy named Kenneth Abney. Now, Kenneth Abney was part of the U.S. Special Forces with some high level secret classified title and operations he was involved with. He used to be in Turkey. Well, Kenneth Abney, since that attempted coup, coincidence? I don't think it is. It's not a coincidence. He retired. He came back to the United States. And although he is from Utah, his residence shows that he lives in Utah, he actually has been working in this church compound next to Fethullah Gulen's compound in Pennsylvania. Now, think about this. He's working in this church. He's another Gulen associate who happens to be a close associate of this pastor. So there are some really, really interesting connections, documentations, evidence here. And it's an important point that I want to make sure is clear to people, okay? The reason Turkish government did not make these evidence documents available before was due to U.S. government officials begging Turkey not to make this information available. Because after investigating and obtaining all this evidence against this charlatan who has been posing as a pastor, Turkey had access to some high-level U.S. CIA operatives and assets who are lurking around not only in Turkey, but in Syria and elsewhere in the region. And it was doing the State Department a favor, Turkey, by not making this evidence available. That's also another reason that CIA wanted to see this pastor either dead. That's why they tried to kill him. They wanted to kill him while he was in the Turkish prison. Or they wanted to get him released without going through this trial, because this pastor going through the trial would expose all sorts of U.S. CIA operatives, assets, names, and that is something that neither the CIA nor the State Department wanted to see. Now, as you can see, the sanctions came today. It's only a few hours old, okay? And Turkey, in response, is said, all deals are off. You want to see not only the Turkish people, you in the United States, people around the world, you want to see the evidence against this pastor? We're going to make it public. And that is going to make these people look really bad, the CIA Obama administration, but it's also going to compromise some high-level CIA operatives and assets. Now, well, the sanction by President Trump and Pence just started this retaliation, and it is well deserved. You don't achieve any kind of diplomacy via threats, via overt threats. You can't let hubris get the better of you in these kinds of cases. And this is starting a highly dangerous, unprecedented dominoes within the geopolitical arena. We have been covering this for years via Newsbud. We have been talking about the fact that, Turkey is like struggling. Do we look eastward towards Russia and China, or do we maintain and try to repair our relationship with EU and especially with the United States after that backstabbing that happened under Obama administration? And I have a message for President Trump, a humble message, but a strong message. Of all the people, President Trump, you should know better than that. You know that your CIA is compromised and they are against you. President Trump, you know that the Justice Department, who is in charge of extraditing this terrorist, this mullah, this radical Islamist terrorist Fethullah Gulen, is compromised. The FBI is compromised, okay? Sir, with all due respect, you can't even control your own house. Hundreds of millions of US taxpayers' dollars have been pouring into this witch hunt, instigated by Clinton's extension, Robert Mueller, whom I consider a criminal, and several other FBI criminals. You haven't even been able to control that, President Trump. You haven't even been able to stop that. And you now have let these same elements, the leftover from Clinton and Obama, set you up like this. Well, act before it's too late. We put a report, we are going to republish that report showing that your CIA behind your back has been sabotaging the release of this pastor. Now I am one of those people who says, do not release this man. This man is a criminal. He's not a pastor. He's not an evangelical. His wife is not who she says she is. These people are operatives, CIA operatives, criminals. Let them see justice. You can't have it both ways. You can't say when a country like Turkey sent you all these documents and evidence and says, extradite this terrorist Islamist mullah, and you do not do anything about it. And you go and finger point and issue threats against the democratic country who has its own judicial process and say, bypass those judicial process. Release this pastor without any process. Well, life doesn't work that way. And Turkey is not Yemen. And Turkey is not Libya, okay? Turkey is not going to release. I'm going to be the first one saying that this man is going to sit in jail and rot in jail and is going to go through the court process. Because the ones who have caused this are the evil elements in the CIA and the Justice Department who are also working against you, President Trump. And I have a message for the evangelicals, the Christian activists who are being used, okay? I understand because of our media here, because of the wrong information being issued by the State Department, you believe you are in the midst of a good cause demanding the release of this man, Brunson. But you are being used. You are not being told the facts about this man who's been posing as a pastor. You, of all people, should wash your hands off of these people who are imposters, okay? They are fake. They are not evangelicals. His wife had a chance to see this negotiation through. Noreen Brunson was contacted by me, by several State Department officials and whistleblowers, by people in Turkey who were going to facilitate the release of her husband despite the fact that he's a criminal. She didn't. She is not who she says she is. And as far as the Turkish people are concerned, and this has nothing to do whether they are from this party or that party. It doesn't have anything to do whether they support President Erdogan's political party or some other political party. Turkish people are dignified and they have pride. They're not going to sit back and say, okay, here is the United States issuing threats, bullying us and saying, you suspend your judicial process in your own country. The heck with the attempted coup we implemented in your country. You're going to release this man, the CIA operative, because we say so. Well, it's not going to work out that way because Turkish people are not going to put up with that. The Turkish government, the current Turkish government administration, they're not going to go along with that. This is a case where they have taken it way too far. But I am still trying to be hopeful and say that before it's too late, President Trump repair this because the real sabotage, the real damage is being inflicted from within, not from outside. You clean your own house. You clean your own CIA. You clean up that Justice Department, the FBI, the misnamed Justice Department that is wasting hundreds of millions of dollars of US tax dollars, undermining the democratic process in this country. Start with your own backyard, President Trump.